One of the things that I did learn about being a photographer, we all shot what we saw. Not what you saw or she saw, but what we saw. So as I now have reached the prime age of 88, I understand that what I saw was really something special. I did not understand that then. I just thought, oh, that looks good. And so, you don't evolve, you don't grow up until you can look back at the body of your work. For 25 years I worked for that guy until I quit. The nicest man in the world. One of the best things that happened to me with Bob Hope. As a kid, long before I came to Hollywood, I had to photograph a comedian named Milton Berle. And it was during the war, and during the war your flash bulbs, because there weren't no strobe lights yet, didn't always work. And so I took two pictures. One picture where the bulb worked, and I got a backup shot. The bulb didn't work. And I went to get another bulb. Milton Berle said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm getting a bulb to put in my camera. The other one didn't work." He picked me up by the nape of my neck. And he was a big guy. And as a kid, I may have weighed 120. Picked me up by the nape of the neck, the seat of the pants, walked me to the door in his dressing room, and flung me out. Well, here he is guesting on the Hope Show one day. And he, Berle, had one of his particularly bad days. "I don't like this, I don't like that, that shouldn't have been there, Bob, this should have been here, and I want to move that over here, it'll work better." And I never saw Hope angry. I never heard him scream or yell. And I knew he was angry. And finally he turned to Milton. He said, "Milton, I'll tell you what, I'm going back to my dressing room. I'm going to go to sleep. You work with my producer, get all the changes you want made, then have somebody come to the dressing room, knock on the door, and we'll finish." And Berle said, "Oh, great, Bob, thank you." And Bob, I'm 4 or 5 feet away, and he has both his hands out, like he's going to kiss me, and puts his hands behind my head and draws his cheek to my cheek and whispers in my ear, "Murray, 5 minutes away from Milton Berle is like a month in the country." Sinatra was a very interesting guy and a lovely guy. Only one day he could walk in and look at you and look right through you and not know who you were. And the next day he could say, "Hey, how are things going? How's Phyllis and the kids?" He hired me to do Natalie Wood's 21st birthday party. And I was really exhausted. He came over to the table and I was unloading some film and reloading some film. And he said, "How you doing, kid?" I said, I'm doing all right, Mr. Sinatra." He said, "Look, you're working awfully hard. I want you to have a drink." I said, "I don't drink when I work." He said, "I want you to have a drink." I said, "Okay, I'll have a drink." And I had a drink, and he said, "You don't have to work as hard as you're working. Whenever you want to stop, you can stop. Any food going around, stop and eat, I don't want you to feel you're here only for pictures." He was that kind of guy. Marilyn Monroe was a very interesting person. She was terrified almost all the time. And even though you couldn't take a bad picture of her if you planned to, I have one portrait that I call the deer in the headlights, because that's how she is. Most of the guys I work with were all talking about what she would be like in bed. I always had this empathy. Oh my God, this poor thing is scared to death. She was in panic when she'd meet these people because she knew how very special they were. She didn't have that feeling about herself. And you can tell she was in panic. Look at her marriage to Joe DiMaggio. Look at her marriage to Arthur Miller. This was an unstable person who was very sweet, but terribly frightened and disturbed. I get a call from a very famous guy named Jim Murray, who used to be the sports editor of the LA Times. He said, can you get immediately up to Brando's house? He said, look, we're doing a cover story on him. He said, send a guy up here right now. He said, be prepared. The man is an SOB. He's going to throw you out in 5 minutes. Had a female who was a friend's wife working for me as an assistant. She said, oh my God, we're going to Brando's house. I said, that's right, we're going to Brando's house. We get in the car and I fly up Benedict Canyon. And I parked at the garage and we grabbed all our cases and cameras and stuff and put them by the door, and I rang the bell. And Mr. Brando came to the door stark naked. I turned to her and said, you wanted to see Marlon Brando? By this time he got furious, slammed the door and walked away. And I figured, well, there was my 5 minutes, right? As we were about to leave to go back to the car, he comes to the door and said, hey, he says, come on in. So I come in the house. As I come in the house, here comes a lady up the steps, partially clad, putting stuff together. She looks at me and turns green, and I look at her and turn white. I knew her husband was a very well-known producer. And he said, why are you so nervous? And he said, Mr. Brando, I'm generally not nervous. I said, but if you think of how this episode began, and then your friend walking up the steps, I know her husband, she knows me. He just smiled, and he said, what do you want me to do? I said, I've noticed your cat walking around your portable typewriter. He said, yeah. I said, do you think you could sit there and do something with the cat? And he then turned to me and said, I want you to know this is not my house. I said, what? He said, this is my cat's house. She lives here, and she lets me live here. So I can't tell you I can do anything with her. I said, can you try? And he said, sure. And we got those pictures which sold all over the world. I exited being a photojournalist in 1973 because I did not want to be on the street with the so-called paparazzi. And when somebody asked me what I thought of the paparazzi, I said, look, you know what I thought of them? I thought they were an Italian dish. I had no idea that this started because the photographers in Rome were following around some beautiful American Swedish actress, and they became known as the paparazzi. Was I born lucky? I, every day, say that I was born extremely lucky.